But there is this spooky phenomenon, this paranormal phenomenon. And it's sort of like that feeling you just know that someone else is in the room with you. But there's a version of this energy that's not so spooky. It's actually very comforting. And it's called third man syndrome.
Okay.
And this phenomenon happens when people are often in times of peril, near death, and they feel another person there with them. In our darkest moments, there is light.
You're actually never alone, even when you shower.
Yeah. The ghosts are watching you.
The ghosts are washing you. Okay.
Dun, 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 dun. Let's go, boys. Hello.
Hey.
This is Two Girls, One Ghost.
Two girls, one ghost. I feel like two voices just came out of me there.
Oh.
Spooky. That's Corinne.
Hi.
I'm Sabrina, and we're your ghostesses, and we're going to lead you through this spooky event of talking that is tonight, whenever you're listening.
Today.
Tonight. I have a ghost story.
What? Oh, really?
Yeah,
wow. From yesterday?
Yeah. Since yesterday, I have a ghost story. The spider's still dead on the ground, in case everyone was wondering.
Well, in case anyone was wondering, I have a child and I
You
vacuum
do?
every 4 weeks. So the spider's going to be there for the next 10 recordings.
Sometimes I wonder if another spider will come by and pick it up and carry it on its back and be like, I got you, brother. We'll give you a proper burial.
Or it will be like, sustenance.
Munchy,
and
yummies,
eat it.
crunchy.
Yeah, I don't know. But R.I.P. spider, you'll be gone in a few weeks.
Yes. We'll keep y'all updated because I know you're all very concerned. Two things, actually. So one, I went to a doctor's appointment this morning and then realized my hairdresser was right next door. And I was like, hey, you up? And she had an appointment available. So I went and got my hair done. And
I need to find a place. Where do you go?
her name is Melanie Blake. She's great. I got a ghost story while I was getting my hair done.
From the salon or from her? Is it a haunted hair salon?
It's not a haunted hair salon,
Okay.
although the woman next to her is very like us, one of us, spooky.
Okay.
I always want to kind of pop my head in there and be like, hey. So someone else is there and they said that their dad for years has had dreams of this same man. His name is George. Continuously dreams about him. And
but had no idea who this was.
Has
It was
never
someone that
met
they'd never
him,
seen before in their
never
lives.
seen him before.
Just a dream man.
A dream man. But then someone in real life asked him about George.
Wait, excuse me?
Yeah.
Like a stranger came up and was like, you know George?
They couldn't remember all the specific details, but something in that vein. Yeah. Basically someone else in the real world, whether they knew the person or not, knew of George and knew that he would know George.
I need a million more details.
I know.
This person, if you ever run into them again where you guys are both getting your hair done at the same time.
I'd be like, tell me more about George.
Yeah. Be like, you better have asked your dad about George. That's wild.
Isn't that crazy?
It makes me so curious because I'm like, well, is George just someone...
We're curious about George.
We are curious, George.
We don't know.
I have a million questions because it's...
And I have zero answers aside from what I told you.
Did you ask more questions? They just couldn't remember.
I asked and she was like, I don't know. I just know that it's weird.
That is weird. I'm really just curious about the other person.
Right. How do
George
they know
is
George?
But how do they know George? And how did they know that this person's dad knows George?
And how to both of these people, is George this sleep god? I don't know.
Or were they all together in a past life?
Maybe.
And George told this other person? So bizarre.
We have questions. If any of you dream of George, let us know.
Yeah.
Who is George?
Mysterious George Dream Man.
Yeah. And my other one, we were talking about this earlier, but for some reason today, the energy is so incredibly palpable and thick. It feels like I'm moving through molasses. This is my second large coffee.
Yeah. You texted me and you're like, I've been crying so much today and these emotions are not my own.
They're not mine.
And I was like, that's so wild because I can't focus and I feel like a big, heavy, it feels like a
weight,
dense weight.
Yeah.
Just around my chest. It's like it exists from here to here.
Yeah. It is. It's almost like a donut.
Yeah. Yeah. Boom.
Yeah.
So strange. Like I really am having a hard time focusing and talking and listening to people today.
Same. So sorry to all of you. We're going to struggle a little bit.
Great day to record 2 episodes.
It's so weird. I've never had an experience this heavy. And like everywhere I've been driving, like I feel like I need to get out of the car. I need to like ground myself. I want to just lay on grass.
Yeah. But at the same time, it like doesn't feel good outside either.
No, like there's no escaping it.
Right. Like I was driving through some of the most beautiful parts of this area. And I should be like, wow, look at these mansions and the like blowing leaves on the trees and like, But instead I was just like, oh my God, I feel weird.
Heavy. Well, we have a really creepy video to talk about that someone shared with us last night.
And we're going to share again tonight on Campfire Stories, which will be a few weeks prior by the time this episode comes out.
Is the Campfire Stories. If you're a Patreon member and want to rewatch it, you have the access and availability to go back and rewatch all of them November 5th. And we'll share it in the beginning of the episode. What?
It was scary enough.
You always look that way. And I'm like, what?
Well, because I was going to talk about the candles. So it was scary enough that I think the ghost in my house got scared because it was the last video shared in our live stream on Patreon. And we sign off like pretty much immediately after. Everyone was like, all right, like have a great nightmare. Goodbye. Yeah. And I'm alone in here and I try to turn off the lights, which are like a battery remote. And we turn them on and off constantly. They would not turn off. Like, click, 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 click. I had to go through because obviously, like, it's not obvious to people.
So obvious?
It's so obvious that we had to buy like 6 packs of these candles to have enough to go across like this. So I have 6 different remotes. And I had to go through every single remote until I finally got the last one. So on my like 40th click, they turned off.
The ghosts were scared.
They don't want it to be dark in here. Whoever's attached to something in here did not. Yeah, the video is very freaky.
Yeah.
Little ghost girl.
As context, our listener Madison has come on to Campfire Stories prior to this. And Madison said she would email like the whole story and we could share it in a future episode. But she had stayed at the Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Very haunted. We've done a whole episode on it. They did a ghost tour with their family and took a photo. And it looks like they very clearly caught what is a ghost caught on camera. Mm-hmm. And it's like the legs and feet of perhaps one of the ghosts at the hotel. Then she was talking to someone who works at the Crescent Hotel, telling them this story. And the woman she was talking to goes, hold on your butt. I've got something for you. Mm-hmm. And shared a video that another guest of the hotel had taken.
Madison did not set up the video correctly for how scary it was. She was like, oh yeah, so the woman is panning, like talking about being at the hotel and like pans from her friend on the bed to the cooler where they had drinks and you see a little ghost girl there. That's what Madison said. So I was expecting for it to pan and for us to see like just like the glimpse of a little girl.
Right.
This girl is sprinting her ass off. Horror movie style across the screen.
Girls trip. Most haunted hotel in America, and my nightstand on the creepy door is my ice chest. So that's why I come back early bedtime looking for ghosts.
And if we slow it down, we'll play it for you here. And if you're watching the YouTube video, as you slow it down, like you can see the ringlets of her hair. You can see that she's wearing a white dress. I also this morning, of course, I was showing my hairdresser. I went frame by frame. You can see her shadow on the wall.
Oh, that gave me chills.
Like right before she enters frame, you see her shadow on the wall first.
Oh my God.
And then you see what's like a blue bow. Oh, I'm getting so many chills. You see like a blue bow in the back of her hair.
Holy shit.
I know.
If anyone's listening and doesn't want to watch, I feel like watching it kind of gave me a similar chill and fright to that classic video where people were like, look at this car driving down the windy road. And then that face comes out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Except for it's not a jump scare. So it's not like the face that comes at you.
No.
Comes at you. It's like a little kid darted through the frame.
It's just so
came out of nowhere
fast.
And ran into the wall. Yeah.
Yep. Literally ran into the wall. She's on a bed. Like, yep. Ran into the nightstand and disappeared.
We'll put on our social media too. And if you're ever curious for any ghostly photos or videos that we've ever talked about, maybe not ever because we're not perfect and we don't get them all.
But we've posted the majority of them. And then we noticed that there were a lot of people that asked like, oh, I'm trying to scroll back really far on your Instagram to find these photos. So we've done a bunch of roundups and we've pinned a bunch, or I guess added them to collections on our
We have
Instagram.
A highlight reel.
Yeah. Highlight reel. That's what
Highlight reel. Collections.
I think that's TikTok.
Is it? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't really understand TikTok. Trying to figure it out.
But I have an interesting thing to talk about today.
Oh, like the topic. I thought you were going to like tell me something new.
No, but we should get into it because I don't know how long it will be for me to say all of these words that I've written down, but I do feel like this is a long one because it took me a long time to write it and it's many, many pages long.
Okay.
So we'll dive into it. Watch us be like 20 minutes long.
Okay. Well, then we can chit chat and make it longer.
Yeah. But there is this spooky phenomenon, this paranormal phenomenon that I recently heard about, or I guess like within the past couple of years, but hadn't done much research into it. And it's sort of like that feeling, when you just know that someone else is in the room with you. Like for paranormal experiences, we know when we're not alone. But I think for anyone who hasn't had a paranormal experience, it's kind of similar to knowing when someone's looking at you and you know to look up and you see someone staring at you.
Is it similar to like the same idea as like entering a room where someone has just been fighting, even though you haven't seen or heard the fight, but you feel the tension? Is it similar?
Yes. Okay. There's an energy in the air.
Okay.
But there's a version of this energy that's not so spooky. It's actually very comforting, and it's called third man syndrome.
Okay.
And this phenomenon happens when people are often in times of peril, near death, and they feel a third, or I guess it's a second person, but it's called third man syndrome, another person there with them.
Is it not the Grim Reaper?
I literally wrote that in my part. I was like, Grim Reaper? Question mark? Everyone's like, Angel. And I'm like, Grim Reaper, just waiting.
Right. And also we did a whole episode on the Grim Reaper where the Grim Reaper's not bad.
No. He's kind of there to help you move on.
Yeah.
He's not there to, he's not killing you.
No, he's literally there to guide you to the other side.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure, but this is the third man syndrome.
Cool.
Third man syndrome is a feeling of an unseen presence. It's a strange experience reported by many people in very extreme situations, especially during life-threatening events. And I thought, let's talk about this because we just are coming off of a month of demonic activity, and this seems a little bit more lighthearted, even though we are going to talk about a lot of people almost dying.
Almost dying, though, not actually dying.
Not actually dying.
There we go. Positivity.
Well, some people died.
Well, a lot of people do die, and the truth is everyone dies.
Everyone does.
It's like the book, Everyone Poops. Everyone dies.
Everyone dies. So let's explore the mysterious worlds of the third man. And we will start with the basics. Third man syndrome is a term used to describe the sensation of a presence, often described as comforting, a guiding figure. It appears to help people during moments of extreme peril or isolation. So think like car crash, hiking accident, or lost in the woods, being shot, like moments where you're so fearful or like you're on the brink of death.
Okay, so it's like listeners have submitted stories where like they got in a car accident, but they really felt like a loved one or a family member was there in the car with them, almost protecting them.
Yes. Yeah. People attribute this to like spirit guides or angels, stuff like that.
Okay.
So the presence is typically not physically visible, but those who experience say that it feels so real and it often feels life-saving, and they often attribute that person or that presence to being the reason that they are alive today.
Oh, so a guardian. How come it's third man, not second man?
I'll tell you.
Okay, thank you.
So this begins. I'll tell you in 3 minutes. This begins, sort of begins, with a man named Sir Ernest Shackleton. He was a famed British explorer. And if you're watching on YouTube, I have a ton of photos from Frank Hurley / Scott Polar Research Institute, University of Cambridge / Getty Images. Just those are some of the providers of the images. And there's a ton of photos because we're about to explore a polar expedition. Jesus Christ.
I had no idea where you were going with it.
Oh my God. I need a third man to come take me over. Help me through this episode.
Is that how it works?
Please.
We're near death recording this podcast.
I feel it. Oh my gosh. Okay. Anyway, there's a lot of photos that were chronicling this journey that I'm about to tell you about with Sir Ernest Shackleton. So it's kind of interesting because they're historic photos and they document a just wild story of survival. So Shackleton had previously led an expedition. I almost said exploration again. I wrote down the word expedition. Expedition. Shackleton had previously...
They are synonymous of each other.
Oh my God. This is the worst episode we've ever recorded. Shackleton had previously led...
It's weird. I think we've gotten worse at speaking being together. I don't know what it is.
It's because, and sometimes, like Brian I feel like Brian witnessed something. Or maybe, never mind.
Am I Brian? Do you not know the difference?
No. I was thinking that Brian was witness to it, but I think it was when we were recording, when we both just looked at each other and like had a conversation in silence. I think we're getting to that point where it's like, we don't actually have to use words. So when we're trying to use words, it's hard.
We have literally, one of the episodes we pre-recorded before your maternity leave, we talked about how when we're going to be in person together, we want to start to telepathically communicate. And I think we've done it.
We're twins. We have our own little language.
I love it.
It is crazy though.
I know.
There's something kind of romantic about it.
We have a romance over here.
Yeah, we share a glance and there's so many words.
I know we're getting so off track, but I'm pretty sure like there's a group of people who listen to our podcasts who like have a fan fiction about you and I being in a relationship.
Really?
Yeah.
Send me the pages. I'll give notes. Shackleton had previously... Jesus Christ, I can't even say the word. Shackleton had previously led an expedition that earned him knighthood because he went to Antarctica. It was super famous. It was super successful. We learned about it in friggin' history class in like middle school or elementary school or whatever. So now they're like, oh, you're so great. Let's give you the title Sir. Sir
That's all it
Ernest
takes?
Shackleton
To become a
just
sir?
surviving
Okay.
Antarctica.
Okay.
Yes. So then he decided, wow, this made me kind of famous and I sort of liked it. So let me head back again.
This made me famous and I kind of liked it.
Yeah.
Does he also, I feel like to earn the Sir title, you also need a pretty cool mustache. Did he have a mustache?
No, he didn't. And there is a photo
Okay.
that we will show in the YouTube video. Here he is.
He looks so serious.
He does. He looks kind of like a movie star, I feel.
Yeah. Well, he is a Sir, so that's pretty legit.
And he is famous.
Yeah. So
He's got all of the criteria to be in
be
the movies.
handsome.
So knighthood is not enough for him. He's like, I need to go back and I need to survive again in the coldest area that I could possibly be in. So he decides to head out to the icy continent on a 1,700-mile transcontinental journey with the hopes of reaching the South Pole, which he'd failed to reach twice before.
Okay. I think I need a map. How far of a journey is it?
He's from England.
So he's going by boat? What's he taking?
Yeah.
What's
He's
his
taking
mode
a
of
boat.
transportation? Okay.
So I'm going to answer that in the next sentence.
Great.
Believe it or not, I will get through the sentence. Shackleton's crew included 27 men plus one stowaway who became the ship's steward, 69 dogs, and a tomcat named Mrs. Chippy.
Mrs. Chippy. Favorite
like
character so
Noah's
far.
Ark or whatever going on.
Are these like sled dogs? Like
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're on it. So this voyage on the ship would become the now famous 1916 expedition, for their ship, the Endurance, became entrapped in ice and wrecked along the way.
Oh.
Shackleton and his men sat on the ship for an entire month before they realized, like, oh shit, we're going to be stuck here for a long time and probably die if we don't come off of the ship, and we're not going to survive this. And they're just kind of like putzing around. They set up camp. They're trying to figure out what to do. And the hull of the ship is becoming more and more crushed. And eventually it's looking like it's about to sink. It literally began to sink. And this is when on February 24th, Sir Shackleton was like, hey, boys, let's go.
Okay.
Dun, 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 dun. Let's go, boys. So he ordered the abandonment of the ship after completing his musical number.
Yes, of course. He had to do a kick line first.
He did. Yeah. Shania, he had, why am I picturing him in pasties? Little black pasties.
I am
with
picturing
pearls
the
connecting them.
Rockettes. So this
Yeah.
we're
It feels
telepathic
that way.
again.
Everyone's down on the ice.
On their
and
knees.
He's yeah, they're praying to him. Like a prayer comes on in the background. He's like, no, not that song. Different one. He ordered abandonment of the ship. All of the guys gotta leave. All of the animals have gotta leave. And thank God they did, because the ship literally sank and it would be missing for many, many years.
Jeez.
So he and the others hopped onto these tiny little rowboats, and then they rowed through the icy, freezy waters to a giant iceberg.
Oh my
They
God.
pulled their boats up onto the sheet of ice, and they were like, if we get on the sheet of ice, perhaps it will float and bring us to where we need to be.
This is Elf.
literally. And the narwhal comes up. Bye,
I hope you find your dad.
find your dad. And Pallet, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. Pallet Island, it was about 250 miles away. And they were like, we think that this sheet of ice appears to be riding a current that is going to get us there. So let's hop on and just ride a sheet of ice.
This feels fake.
It does. It's a wild story. It gets like so much crazier.
You know what it crazily reminds me of? And I don't even know if you would have seen this. I had never seen it. the movie Tusk?
No,
But
but
do you
I
know what
have
I'm talking
seen clips
about?
of it from TikTok and it looks extremely disturbing.
It is the most disturbing movie I've ever
Wait,
seen.
you've seen it?
Yeah, Payne showed it to me. It is so disturbing, but what's the actor's name?
Is it like Nicolas Cage or something?
No, what's his name?
That's the one where the man becomes
A walrus.
a walrus.
Oh, Justin Long. Okay, so in this movie, Justin Long is a podcaster. He's kind of a douchey podcaster, but
He's been playing some douchey characters recently.
I think he plays it well. Yeah,
Yeah.
he did it in Barbarian too.
Yeah.
But he encounters an old man who has an adventure similar to this. Like he was abandoned on a ship and he hopped onto an iceberg to survive.
How in the world does he become a walrus?
I can't ruin it.
Now I have to watch it.
You have to because we need to talk about it. It's so bizarre.
This is one of those things where like my brother had seen, what is it? A Siberian film or something like that.
Yeah. I've
never watched that. But that's what my brother said. He was like, this is the most fucked up movie I've ever seen in my life. Like, this is so disturbing. This didn't tell me any other information. And so then I watched it and it like, I probably should go to therapy for it.
I don't think this is like that. It's just weird in the sense of like, oh shit.
This man became a walrus.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Spoiler alert, none of these guys become walruses, but they do hop on a sheet of ice and they try to ride to safety of this island. Well, I don't know if you can call it safety. It's a treacherous
Safer than, I guess, an iceberg in the middle of the ocean.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're trying to survive and they're trying to find other humans to help them, basically. So they get on this ice, but the ice is not going fast enough. It is the slowest freaking sheet of ice in this entire sea. So
how rude.
They drag their little dinky lifeboats back into the water and they find another sheet of ice. And this one is cruising a little bit faster.
Sorry, it just sounds so comical.
I know. It's kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. They're like, this porridge is too cold. This porridge is too hot.
This is wild.
Well, this sheet kind of feels just right.
Okay.
So they have some success. They are dragged about 60 miles away from their target island. But now, in order to get the rest of the way, they would have to take their little tiny lifeboats. But it is impossible because those 60 miles are covered by this like broken, slushy, impenetrable ice.
Not thick enough probably to walk. Like they would crush through.
100%.
Also, what about supplies? Do they have food?
They do.
Okay.
Not a ton, but they do. They couldn't get to this island. And so it's now April 9th. So it's been basically like 6 or 7 weeks since they've abandoned their ship. Jeez. And these men, they could not get any more unlucky. There was a large cracking sound suddenly underneath them. A vibration goes through the ice. And the sheet of ice in which they are standing on and which they have taken up home has now split in two. So they have to get in their boats. But they can't go to the island that they thought they were going to go to. So for 5 days, they go in a different direction. And they row to the nearest shore, which happens to be Elephant Island. And it's been 6 weeks. They are now 360 miles away from where they had left their boat. So they are super far.
They traveled 363 miles.
On a sheet of ice, basically. On little tiny
and
lifeboats
no one died at this
sheets
point?
of ice. No one died.
That's crazy.
Yes. They did take the majority of animals with them, but I will say this. Some of the dogs some of them were not strong enough.
Oh.
And they were a little sick and they did shoot them.
Sad.
It is sad.
But they didn't eat them.
They didn't eat them. And also, I would rather them shoot the dogs than just like abandon them and leave them for like a polar bear to come attack.
Or let them like slowly die in pain.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So they get to Elephant Island, but they soon realize that Elephant Island is isolated. It's not on any shipping routes. No one is going to find them there. And they will probably die because their rations are becoming depleted. They don't have enough supplies to let them live there forever.
I feel like this is the first draft of the TV show Lost.
I still haven't seen Lost. I need to.
It might be late to the game.
So they know that they cannot stay here on Elephant Island. So back into their tiny little boats they go again. But with limited provisions, and now the burden of the larger crew seems to be too much. So they make the decision that a small group of them is going to break off, and that small group is going to move forward and try to find help. The rest of them are going to stay behind and stay on Elephant Island.
Okay, so move forward is going towards their original plan, but they're actually going to go try to find help.
They're going to try to find help.
Okay.
Yes. So there's 6 of them that decide to continue, and they leave Elephant Island on the little boats, and they're heading to South Georgia Island to seek help from a whaling station.
Okay.
So they know that there's going to be people there.
Okay.
So the 6 men, they spent the next 15 days with only 4 weeks of supplies with them left, or like packed with them, sailing towards South Georgia Island, which I believe was some 720 miles away from Elephant Island.
This is bananas.
I know. And it's not like they had a GPS. Like, this was map days.
They don't have anything. It's a compass
And,
day.
How do you, I just picture the sky as being so white and bright and everything looking exactly the same because you're just like existing in this ocean of ice. Like,
it's
how
freezing
are you not
too,
completely
probably.
turned around all the time?
Oh, gosh.
I know. So during this time at sea, not only are they in some of the most dangerous waters in the world, but they're in this tiny, tiny little boat.
Yeah.
And now, on top of that, a hurricane comes through. This hurricane should have sunk their boat and killed them. Like 100%, it is near impossible for them to have survived this. Nearby, there was a 500-ton steamer that literally sank in the same ocean waters. But somehow this tiny little dinky lifeboat and these 6 men do not die.
For a moment, I forgot that this is the third man syndrome episode because it's so bizarre. And I had to remind myself that, like, there's a presence here. You set us up with the beginning of the third man syndrome, meaning there's something helping and guiding these people.
Right.
Okay.
And this photo I had put into YouTube, but I'll show you why I'm calling it a dinky little lifeboat because, like, that's basically a canoe.
It's tiny.
It's tiny.
Also, think about how exhausting it is, the energy they are exerting in order to travel 700 miles.
It's uncovered, too. Like, it's not like they can just, like, go underneath.
Do they take
sleep.
shifts to nap?
I have no idea. I do know that actually during this time, I mean, it took them like 15 days to get to the next spot that they were trying to go to. But there were many days where none of them slept at all, and they were starting to go pretty delirious, which makes sense.
Of course.
So after 15 days with only 4 weeks of supplies left and surviving a hurricane, they get to the island that they're supposed to get to. But it is so windy, and the side of the island that they got to, you basically like almost couldn't get onto shore. There were so many rocks. The waves were crazy. They were like, if we attempt this, we're going to crash our boat and just sink it and die because we're not going to be able to like stick onto the rocks and scale them. So they waited one more day, and somehow miraculously the next day they were able to actually land on shore, which again, like they probably shouldn't have been able to, but somehow they got onto the shore.
Jesus.
And so then getting onto shore is not like getting to safety at all because they're on the complete opposite end of the island that they should be. And by foot, without any proper equipment to traverse this terrain, this group of men now have to go all the way across this island. They're like, hey, we might have to break up this group of 6. And so they basically split in half. Half of them stay behind with the boat on the south part of the island, and the other half move. Or maybe it was north and south. I don't remember.
They go to
which
the other
direction,
side. Yeah.
But they go to the other side.
Jeez.
So before the group with Shackleton, the 2 men with Shackleton, go to traverse all of this island, this icy island, to find help, they take nails and they stick them through their shoes, through their boots, to try to give themselves some sort of traction to like actually be able to walk across the ice.
I mean, that's smart, but I also imagine that like there's some part of the nail that's going back up and like causing a lot of pain on their actual 100%.
Foot. Yes.
Jeez.
The journey to the whaling station would last 36 hours, and no one slept during these 36 hours.
After 15 days of traveling.
Yeah.
After
and
many
months of being
months.
trapped on in the Arctic seas.
This is giving me an eye twitch. Like, I'm stressed for them.
I can't even believe they survived like even a few days.
I'm also surprised that everyone at this point, aside from a few of the dogs, have survived.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to the tomcat. Hopefully the cat survived too. So in his account, Shackleton noted that he, along with his 3 other companions, felt an additional unseen figure walking beside them, encouraging them to push through despite their exhaustion and their near-death condition. And in his 1919 book called South, he wrote, quote, during that long and racking march of 36 hours over the unnamed mountains and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. They called it the 4th man, since there were already 3 of them, and they all seemed to feel another presence there.
Yeah.
The presence helped guide them and encourage them, and the men did make it to the whaling station. And then they were like, hey, we have to go save the rest of our whole crew that we left on Elephant Island. And that's, 700 plus miles away. So
plus the other 3 that they left on the other side of the island.
Yeah. And they did, or I think maybe it was just 2. I don't remember numbers. 6 total. And then
the rest.
That group of 6 made it. And then they went and got the rest of them. But there were 3 failed attempts to even get the rest of the men that were left behind on the island. But they did eventually recover everyone 4.5 months later.
Everyone.
Every single person survived. Everyone. Including the freaking stowaway. Imagine being a stowaway on this journey.
Like shit, you picked the wrong ship to stow away on.
Yeah, classic.
Holy shit.
Titanic move, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so not a single person died from this expedition. The ship, the Endurance, was lost to the seas for 106 years until March 9th of 2022 when a team of scientists and adventurers found it at the bottom of the Weddell Sea, 10,000 feet below. So this in and of itself was a miracle. I actually have no idea.
I would love something from that boat. Like there's something really magical about this whole expedition and the fact that they survived that I almost feel like it would be an honor.
Well, the Titanic expedition that's in Boston right now, they have an actual piece of the Titanic that they are allowing everyone to touch.
You can touch it?
You can touch the Titanic. And now there's this like metal eating bacteria. I didn't even go to the museum. My dentist was talking about it. There's a metal eating bacteria that's eating away at the Titanic. So they think in like 50 years, the ship isn't going to exist. So they're the only expeditions now to the Titanic are basically to recover and try to retrieve as much as possible. Yeah, because it's not going to exist soon. How crazy.
Jeez.
So all of this is a miracle. It's a miracle that they were able to find the ship. It's a miracle that all of the guys survived. Like this whole thing just shouldn't have existed in the way that it did. It truly was miraculous. But Shackleton and his crew were not alone in experiencing this extra guiding presence that they cited as being their sort of like guiding force and extra encouragement. His account encouraged survivors who experienced something similar to start coming forward and share their stories. And so began kind of these accounts of this
is the first
man.
I survived.
This is the first I survived. Yeah.
Wow.
Basically.
So it's not just people from his expedition. He's asking like worldwide, globally, has anyone else experienced some type of force in a dire situation that you did survive?
But I don't think he like proposed the question, but he wrote a book in 1919. And I think that book kind of, that was before like the world wars happened and stuff like that. And I think that he kind of set the foundation for a lot of other people to assign a name to this feeling.
Wow.
Or like at least cite someone else who experienced something similar. Because the name didn't really come until years later when, inspired by Shackleton's story, T.S. Eliot wrote a poem called The Wasteland in which he coined the term third man syndrome. So he writes, "Who is the third man who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together. But when I look ahead up the white road, there is always another one walking beside you, gliding wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded. I do not know whether a man or a woman. But who is that on the other side of you?" So he basically coined the term the third man in this poem, which is why we now have third man syndrome today.
So is it like, because again, like the third man, I understand that T.S. Eliot coined it, but like in that poem, is he saying like, is he writing like as if it's you and me together, Corinne, and he sees a third man in their presence?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So he took some creative liberties to eliminate some extra people from Shackleton's story for the sake of his poem.
Right. But I guess it's this idea that like everyone perhaps has a shadow of sorts, that like when you're one-on-one with someone, like maybe there is a presence always with others and with you.
Yeah.
But like you can't perceive your own and you're seeing someone else's. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. I don't know.
I don't know
what T.S. Eliot meant by his poem. I didn't read the whole thing.
T.S., can we talk to you, please?
T.T. But the idea of this invisible companion appears to provide a lot of strength in these dire moments. And this has sparked fascination, research, and a lot of speculation. So Shackleton's story is arguably one of the most famous. And it was like attributed as being the first, but it's not really the first because people also are like, okay, well, if you look back at pretty much any religious text, there's all of these talks of other beings and gods and angels and energies and different things that people attribute to being the reason that they survived or like feeling
protection
their presence. Yeah, exactly. Like we always talk about guardians and spirit guides. And all of that's the same thing. It's just kind of like rewrapped and rewritten in different forms.
Right.
However, it wasn't until the 20th century that these experiences started being studied more scientifically. So anecdotally, it was told, religiously and spiritually, people have always talked about this, but scientifically, it started to be studied in the 20th century.
Hell yeah.
It was first clinically documented in the 1940s, and it was really just a population of climbers and adventurers that were mostly being studied, and this was the largest group to contribute to these stories of the third man syndrome, which makes sense. They're like always in danger.
Like near-death experiences. Yeah.
A man named Reinhold Messner, one of the greatest mountain climbers in history, was climbing Tibet's Daimer Mountain. And he was climbing with 2 other people. And they were using these crampons and axes. And they were just barely biting into the ice. Like they were like barely hanging on.
Jesus.
Basically near death.
It's like that Free Solo documentary.
Yeah. It was not looking good for Alex or for Reinhold.
Yeah.
But suddenly, Reinhold said that he sensed a third climber next to him, descending with them, all of them. And he said that this climber felt just a few steps away from him, was just out of his field of vision, but he was so certain that there was someone there, like just out of reach, just out of sight, also climbing and descending at the same time as them.
So wild.
I know. Mountaineer Frank Smith, he had a similar experience. He chose to continue on in poor conditions in attempt to summit Mount Everest. So he was with a crew. It became too dangerous. The rest of the crew was like, see ya, we're not risking our lives. And he was like, oh, I just need to try. Like, we're so close to the summit, which is exactly what happens to so many people who never make it. Like, they just push themselves a little bit further. Luckily for Frank, he did survive. He didn't make it to the top, but he went solo attempting to summit.
Jeez.
And while he missed the summit by only 340 some meters, he never felt alone the entire time. He was alone after the rest of the group had left him. He could have sworn there was another person with him, and he felt so vehemently like that correct in this assumption that there was another person, that there was one point in his climb where he stopped to take out some food that he had. It was like a bit of cake or whatever. And he literally turned to offer the other climber that he thought was like behind him some cake, because he thought like, oh, there's another stranger that's also pushing to make summit. And there was no one there.
It's so weird because this makes like, it just makes me wonder like, why these people? Why not everyone? Or do we all have this? And it's just like, sometimes they're more present, or I don't know. Like,
it might just be who accepts what they feel. Because you're reminding me of that like classic philosophical story or whatever. But basically the story is like, oh, the man is like in a lifeboat, or there's something where like he's near death.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I think he's stranded on an island. Sorry, I'm telling this horribly.
I have no idea.
This man is stranded on an island and he asks God to save him. And there's like all of these things that happen. Like a lifeboat comes and he rejects it. Like there's all these situations that come and he's like, I'm waiting for God to appear and like pick me up and bring me back. And when he dies, he asks God, why didn't you save me? And God's like, I sent you a lifeboat. I sent you this.
Like,
I sent you.
Like, I did everything to save you. Yeah.
So this is reminding me of that. Where like maybe everyone does have this. It's just not always so intense that we're able to feel it.
Right.
Or feel confident enough to make the assumption that it is this extra present.
Well, then it also opens up like a whole other conversation of like, is it one person on this expedition or on this voyage who has a really strong spirit guide and guardian who's with them? Or going back to Sir Shackleton, like, was there like one person who had a really strong guardian who helped protect everyone? Or with this Everest story, is there someone who did pass away and die on Everest? Because there are a lot of deaths that have happened on Everest.
Yeah.
Like that there's this energy and this spirit who's trying to prevent further deaths and wanted to guide him through the rest of his journey. Or is it a third man syndrome, which is like a one single entity? I don't know.
Or is it like are we all saving ourselves? Is it our own hallucination in a time of peril?
We're all a little bit crazy.
Yeah. It is. So that's, I guess, the thing with the third man syndrome is there's so many different examples, and I'm going to tell a bunch, which doesn't really answer any of those questions because there are some tweaks to everyone's story where it's like, is this someone we know? Is this someone that we don't?
Welcome to Two Girls, One Ghost in the world of the paranormal, where we know nothing.
No, we don't.
But we love to explore it.
Yes. Another encounter with this mysterious guardian, the third man, was experienced by James Sevigny.
Sevigny?
Sevigny.
Sounds like a name.
He was caught in an avalanche while climbing the Canadian Rockies, and he and his friend Richard Whitmire were climbing Delta Form. And so the two men, they're tied together and they're trying to traverse over some ice when some other falling ice comes and catches the two of them and basically like just they're in an avalanche. They get like taken down and they're tied together. So together they are carried 2,000 feet to the base of the mountain in this avalanche. James, he was knocked unconscious. After some time, he opens his eyes and he realizes how badly his body is injured. And he's really confused as to what happened. But he looks over and he sees that his friend had not survived the fall. So his friend was dead next to him. And James, he had fractures in his vertebrae. He had cracked ribs. He had broken his arm. He broke his shoulder blade. He had a bunch of ruptured ligaments. And he was very confused about what had happened. So he just basically crawled over to his deceased friend, Richard, and curled up beside him and just was like, I'll wait here until my injuries take me and I'll die next to my friend.
Oh, yeah. Because like it feels like he's going to die. Like what else are you going to do? Yeah.
This is such a sad fact too.
What?
If they hadn't been tied together, his friend would have missed the falling ice based on where he was, and he would have survived.
I guess you don't know for sure. Like he could have still landed in that same spot.
Or been like so startled that he like, or maybe them going together is what saved James.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. It's so hard to know, but James is there curled up, buried under snow, freezing, in immense pain next to his friend who's passed, and he's certain he's going to die. But 30 minutes later, James felt the presence of a man next to him. And this man calmly assured him that he wasn't alone. So he felt the presence, but he couldn't see anyone, but he heard a voice speak to him. And it was inside of his head. So like the voice was being implanted into James's mind.
Was it the voice of his friend?
No.
Oh, interesting.
It wasn't. But the voice said, you can't give up. You have to try. Wow. And suddenly he felt super peaceful. He felt so unafraid. And all of a sudden he had this like energy and motivation to get up despite his like horrible injuries. And he mustered all of his strength to walk/crawl all the way back to base camp, which was at this point, it was actually only 1 mile away, but with all of his injuries and in the freezing cold after being like destroyed by an avalanche, is a very far
and
journey.
Disoriented and confused and 100%. Probably like not really sure where you are.
Yes. So this presence was with him the entire time. It was giving him words of encouragement. It was giving him tips on how to survive this whole walk/crawl to base camp. And at dusk, after a long time, James finally made it to just outside of base camp. And in this moment, he felt the presence leave him and suddenly felt all of the pain and exhaustion come back to his body. And he collapsed. Whoa. He was unable to make it any further. And he's laying there in the snow once more. And then he heard some distant voices. He heard people. So he screams, hoping someone will hear him. And they did. They came out and they got him and he was saved.
This kind of, I mean, it reminds me, and I don't know that we have actually heard the story, and it might be something I've like seen in a movie or a TV show, but this concept, or I think maybe I saw it in like Unsolved Mysteries or something, but like there was a car accident and multiple people were in the car and one person lived, and they swore like the dad had gone into the back seat to unbuckle them to save them, but the dad had died upon like impact and was still like buckled in his seat when his body was found.
That's so, I just got chilled. It reminds me of the book If I Stay. Did you ever read that?
Yeah. Yes.
And it might be an Unsolved Mysteries episode 2 where that man, I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, where that man witnessed another car accident and he like gets out of his car and he's running to go, and he's trying to like about loop up and go around to save that man. And he's like running to the bridge, and it should have taken him like 10 minutes to get to the car, but he was there within 30 seconds and he has no idea how he got there.
Yeah.
So like in that case, he kind of like, he almost was the paranormal figure.
Yeah. Oh, so weird.
So there's another South Pole expedition, and this is in November of 1998. Peter Hillary, he's in a bit of a life or death situation. He's out in the elements in Antarctica, and this third man comes to save him. And in his case, this is what's a little different for his third man. It was his mother who had passed some 20 years earlier in a car accident.
That's sweet.
So for the majority of people, it's been this like extra presence that they can't recognize the voice. They can't recognize
Is it George?
The presence. Holy shit! Is everyone George?
Is George the third man?
Is George? We talked about this. I don't even know when the episode comes out. Or no, it came out last week.
Wait, which one?
When we were talking about like the idea that we're all just one, we're like chips of one entity trying to experience life.
Oh, the universal consciousness thing.
Is it George? Is George
universe?
Everyone? Are we all a little bit of George?
George is within all of us.
Because George was curious
I
about
do
living
love
life.
the name George.
It is a strong name.
Like I feel a connection to it. Maybe because we are all George.
Because we're all George. Who doesn't like the name George? George is a good name.
George is a great name.
Petition that every child has to be renamed George. I want one entire population.
Your name is now George. My name is now George.
We're all George.
Hello, this is Two Girls, One Ghost with your ghostesses, Georges.
The Georges.
The Georges.
How fun, though, when aliens come to visit us and they're like, everyone's name is George.
Yeah.
We are. When did that happen? We just decided it one day.
One day,
Humanity's
these two
weird.
women on a podcast decided everyone should be renamed George.
So this is interesting because, yes, it was his mom. Diver Stephanie Schwab, she had kind of a similar situation. She got separated from her diving guide off of South Bahama Island. And she was not just diving normally, she was cave diving. Arguably the most scary and dangerous version. Well, I don't even think it's arguably. I think it is. In fact, cave diving is way more dangerous than regular diving.
Yeah, scary.
It's so dangerous. So she gets separated. She's in this cave. She has no idea where she is. And she panics because the chances of her dying have just increased exponentially. All of a sudden, there's a light in front of her. And her late husband speaks into her head and calms her down and tells her, no, you're going to survive. And so she breathes, slows down her breathing, and she just slowly starts to move through the cave, reaching out, touching the sides, until she saw the white line, the one that was put out by the dive guide that led back to the surface. Her husband left her in that very moment, the second she found the cable, and Stephanie made it to the surface and survived. Yeah. So it is interesting because the majority of people experience this unseen presence, but there are times that people see and interact with someone that they've never seen before. So it's like there's different layers. It's like feeling like someone's there. There's hearing a voice and actually being helped by this unseen presence.
Right.
There's seeing a presence, and then there's sometimes the identification of who that person is.
Right.
So third man.
It's an amorphous term.
Yeah. It's loosely defined. Thirsty girl. That's going to make it in the fanfic. Thirsty girl.
Thirsty girl.
So there was actually a study done on these adventures and these types of experiences. And the largest group, they basically like categorized who was most likely to experience third man syndrome and this phenomenon. And the largest group by far was climbers. So climbers.
Interesting.
Probably the most dangerous, I guess, like in this situation, they get in the most dangerous situations.
It's so interesting to me because I feel like a lot of these stories are in situations where people have willingly put themselves in a dangerous place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rather than like an accident happens.
Right.
I don't know what that says about it, but
yes.
I'm curious.
And I think that by and large, I guess like these people are putting themselves in these dangerous situations more frequently. So they're more likely to experience something like this. But I think we also have a little bit of a skewed view right now because the study was done on adventurers. So I'm only talking about adventurers in this exact moment.
Right.
So climbers were number one. Solo sailors and shipwreck survivors were the second most likely in this group to experience third man phenomena. And polar explorers were third.
It kind of reminds me of when I did the Marblehead episode when I talked about the White Wizard of Marblehead, William Dimmond. A lot of sailors would hear William's voice or the Wizard Dimmond's voice as like storms were clearing and they were like being led to safety.
His name isn't George. Are we all just William, actually?
I don't know.
Everyone was named William or George or
John
back then.
Something, yeah.
So I guess like this makes sense because these people are participating in really high risk activities and some of them like have dangerous professions and they just do it regularly. But this has led people to wonder, like, is this really a guardian? Is this a hallucination in someone's darkest moments? And obviously, we're a paranormal podcast, so we do believe in the paranormal.
We're like,
so
yeah, paranormal.
We're not the quickest people to yell, like, it's definitely not a ghost.
I don't think we've ever done that, really.
No, we've never done that.
Never.
But we are open to people trying to debunk things and trying to understand the unexplained.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in this research that has been done on this third man syndrome, a common theme throughout all of these encounters is that people report to feel a comforting presence in times of great distress. So we've talked a lot about people who are adventurers, people who are explorers, people who often and opt to partake in really dangerous things, but not everybody does. Like you were saying, there's car accidents, there's different things like that. And I will tell some examples in a moment.
Ooh.
One of the most widely accepted explanations comes from neuroscience and psychology. Some researchers believe that third man syndrome is a survival mechanism triggered by the brain under extreme stress. So it's basically like we're projecting this extra presence. It's a figment of our imagination.
Like the survival element of yourself like separates from your physical body to help guide you there.
Yeah. Yeah. You like separate into two.
Yeah, I could see that.
So in high pressure situations, the brain may create a sense of another presence to help manage the situation. This could be a cognitive coping strategy, a way that the brain can compartmentalize the trauma by creating a separate entity that helps guide the person to safety. Which, as I'm saying this is reminding me, I know I just talked about If I Stay, but this is reminding me of Adrift. Did you
watch that movie? The Shailene Woodley? Yeah.
It's about it's a true story.
True story, right?
But basically, like, there's this woman who miraculously survived with very little boating experience, this horrible journey on a sailboat where a storm basically like killed her partner, but she did not know her partner was dead because he was with her the entire time. Like she saw him with her the whole time. And so the whole story is about like her hallucinating and making, this is reminding me of Life of Pi now too. I'm getting see, the story exists in many different forms.
Yeah. I also understand like the idea of human instinct to survive. Like our brains are so powerful and the desire to survive is like animalistic and primal and ingrained in us.
Totally.
That I imagine there is this like part of the brain that like works in a different way that we don't fully understand in that moment.
Yeah. So there's also a theory that is tied to sensory deprivation. So in extreme conditions like in cold or isolation, altitude sickness, our sensory systems can become impaired. So Shackleton's crew hadn't slept for some 80 plus hours. I think I said 36 hours. They hadn't slept in 80 plus hours. So basically, like, it's saying you could trip balls and you could just see people, which is what happens to people in Everest all the time. Or like, you know, like the classic, like you're stuck in the desert, you start to hallucinate and see
like the lighthouse effect too.
Totally. So basically, the scientific study just resulted in a bunch of theories. And essentially, it's suggesting that we can't rely on our senses. Our brains might fill in the gaps by creating this presence. Neurological theories also suggest that changes in brain chemistry, such as increased dopamine levels, may play a role. And dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with reward and survival, can spike during life-threatening situations, potentially causing these hallucinations. But here's a little bit of a counter-argument for the paranormal explanation, the paranormal side of third man syndrome. These third man hallucinations aren't terrifying. They're not chaotic. I mean, the experience that people are having is. But this third man is always calm, always focused, always guiding them. And so if we were to hallucinate a person, how could everyone hallucinate the same sort of vibe?
Right. Especially if it's not like someone experiencing like their deceased husband or mother. Like a lot of these are just
it's
like
a complete stranger.
George.
A voice they've never heard. It's George. Yeah. So we would assume that people would see different things. This is kind of the same argument we make for sleep paralysis. Like, why has someone who doesn't know anything about sleep paralysis, who's never experienced it before, having the exact same experience as someone 3,000 miles away that also has never known anything
and
about
they're
it?
not on drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where I was like, is it the Grim Reaper?
Right.
Is George the Grim Reaper? So it's always a calming and guiding presence, and it's usually just out of sight, right? And it's also important to remember that while science may not fully explain every aspect of this phenomenon, those who have experienced it often describe this as a really profound and life-changing experience. It has lasting impact and it changes these people immensely.
It almost also feels like a near-death experience, like that they've come back from and almost are misinterpreting as
interesting,
a living experience.
Which I totally get for the people that are solo, but it's interesting, like in Shackleton's case,
right?
The whole like it's a
everyone,
group.
Yeah. Again, theories.
We don't know. So because it's not always the same person every single time, and because people don't always know who it is, some people said it's a spirit guide, it's a guardian, that it's just something almost angelic, and it doesn't matter who it is or what you experience, but it's just some sort of divine intervention to help people in these really distressing and near-death times.
Yeah.
And this is where like the whole topic of fate and destiny comes into play, because people are like, well, are our futures already decided for us? Like, how can they
I kind of do think they are.
be altered? I know.
But then it's like there's free will within that, right? Because it's like,
so is that why certain people hear, you know, like when we've had listeners email us being like, they hear someone say stop or whatever, like right before they were about to go at a light, and that saved them from a car accident. Like, was that other car, that other driver experiencing free will in that moment and wasn't supposed to be going?
See, this is the part of the paranormal conversation that's so hard to talk about because it's like confounding.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, like having been through stuff, I'm like, look, I came out on the other side and maybe my life is better because of what I went through. I have to believe that like everything's going to work out and will work out as it's meant to, which is basically saying that life is already predetermined and like there is a fate for us.
It's interesting because like that kind of connects to reincarnation in a way. Like we come back to experience something or learn a particular lesson.
Right. Which in the episode that will come out in December that we did with Elisa Kelly, it's a lot of like what's destined in the stars when you're born. And she was analyzing our charts and like my chart is so heavily in like the psychological journey that like my whole life I'll be going through and learning and experiencing psychological lessons.
It is wild. Like birth charts and astrocartography and astrology and like all of that just blows my mind. Because if you get an actual reading that's so specific to you for like what time you were born, when you were born, where you were born, if you don't believe in horoscopes, like do that. And then you're going to be like, oh my God.
It's wild.
It's so spot on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so we don't have to go too far off course here. We'll go back to third man syndrome. Parapsychologists who study paranormal phenomenon, like near-death experiences, often view third man syndrome as evidence that the human consciousness might have connections beyond the physical world, that we're always tapped in some sort of way, that sometimes it just takes a certain setting, a certain condition, a certain near-death experience for us to be able to channel and tap into this other world that like exists on top of ours that some people feel disconnected to and other people seem to just like fully experience all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a third man, or a presence, if you will, who appears in a moment of peril and helps people survive. But how? Well, I don't know. But I do.
I was going to say, do you know? Does anyone know?
No. But I do have some real life accounts that do not involve adventurers. So we can see some examples of people that are not just actively saying, put me with the polar bears, submerge me 200 feet below the ocean.
It's more of like everyday experiences.
Everyday experiences, accidents.
I want to remember what episode this is, but this is also really reminding me of a listener story we read that it's not necessarily like paranormal in the sense, but it's very much like this, where she was out on like camping with someone and she kept like feeling she had to get in her boat and they found like someone who was like stranded and needed help. Do you remember that? I'm not like saying it perfectly, but that idea of like she wasn't going to get in her boat and something told her to and something told her which direction to go in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, this is coming. And now that you're talking about this is also triggering a memory of the podcast Snap Judgment Presents Spooked.
Yeah.
There is an episode on that podcast where there's a girl who I think she was camping and like these men started coming towards her and she heard a voice in her head saying, run. And like basically told her like where to hide and to keep hiding and like all of this stuff as these men were coming to try to find her to like basically attack her and probably kill her. Yeah. And it was just a voice that existed in her head that was like telling her when it was safe and where to go and when to run.
Y'all, I want to tap in on that voice. I need George.
Chills. In 1916, there was a man named Henry Stoker. He's a distant cousin of Bram Stoker, the creator of Dracula. And he was a prisoner of war in a Turkish camp. And he escaped alongside two others, attempting to cross 350 miles to get to shore with nothing but raisins and cocoa powder to sustain them. That's all they were able to grab.
Damn.
They would travel only at night and hide during the day. There were 3 men, but these 3 men quickly became 4 because a comforting presence joined them. And this presence was felt by all of them. It was just out of sight. It was like they knew someone was there, but they couldn't pinpoint exactly where the person was, or it felt like they were just right behind a tree or like hiding right behind a rock, sitting just out of view around the corner.
Right.
But this person was always there, just standing right out of sight.
I mean, I feel like this is also very religious, like could be viewed very religiously, like God or Jesus or like some type of like
Angels.
higher being guiding you. Yeah.
Totally. During World War II, there were multiple accounts from soldiers who described feeling an unseen companion in combat. And this figure often appeared during moments of intense stress, offering guidance, helping them to try to go back to being calm. And these experiences, while sometimes attributed to sheer exhaustion or hallucinations, seemed way too vivid and also extremely consistent across many different people to be easily dismissed.
Sure.
Another famous example comes from Charles Lindbergh. He was a pioneering aviator, and he made the first solo transatlantic flight in 1927. And during his 33-hour flight, Lindbergh reported sensing multiple invisible presences in the cockpit with him. He described them as comforting figures who spoke to him and helped him stay alert during this really long and exhausting journey. And despite the isolation and fatigue, these presences, these beings, helped him navigate the perilous flight successfully.
I also love for that one, I like to think that there are these ghosts who are like, fuck yeah, I
We're
want to get on
flying.
a plane. I want to be the first one to fly across the
Whoa.
world. Yeah.
They're like, whoa,
Look, Mom.
new experience. Who wants to go? It's like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory sort of thing, where it's like
they got the golden
world,
ticket.
They got the golden. Yeah, we're giving out 5 golden tickets to join Charles Lindbergh in his little plane.
There's
who's
only
gonna go?
so much room.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get like a time slot you sign up for.
Yeah.
First
It's
come,
very
first
exciting
serve.
for the ghost world.
Yeah, of course.
One thing that was not exciting for the ghost world,
What?
and for anyone else here, was 9/11.
Oh.
So there were a lot of experiences that happened on September 11th when there was a terrorist attack in New York City and the Twin Towers were hit. Ron DeFrancesco is one of the most well-documented modern-day accounts of third man syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
He's a survivor of 9/11, and Ron was trapped in the South Tower of the World Trade Center during these horrific attacks. Ron found himself disoriented. He was alone. Smoke was filling the building, and he could not find his way to safety. He was looking for the stairs, but he was obviously completely panicked.
Yeah.
And he couldn't see anything. The smoke was so thick. It seemed so certain that he wasn't going to make it out. And basically in that moment, he just accepted this is how he goes. And so he gave up. He laid down. He attempted to accept his fate and wait for the smoke or for the collapsing building to take him. But then, as Ron recalls, he felt a presence behind him and a hand reached out to him through the smoke. So he saw this hand and Ron grabbed the hand. And the person led him all the way down the stairs to the exit out of the building.
Oh my gosh.
And he recalled that it was like there was this voice accompanying this person as well that was holding his hand. And the voice was urging him forward, telling him, get out, keep moving. You've got this. Let's go. And it was not a voice he recognized, but he said that it gave him the strength to keep going. He felt confident that they were going to make it out.
Hold on to the hand too.
Yeah. And I think in the moment, like he thought it was another person. Like he thought that the duo was determined to make it out.
Right.
So he made it out to safety just moments before the building collapsed. He was one of just 4 people to escape from above the 81st floor. And he believes the presence saved his life that day because no one else came out of the building with him in that moment. There was no one else discovered near where he was. They have no clue who that person was guiding him out of the building. Yeah, it was paranormal intervention.
Wow.
And there are so many more reports like this from 9/11. There are people who were shepherded to safety by these invisible forces, by these voices showing them where to go, telling them where to go, guiding them through the smoke and impossible things. So this is why it's like, how is it a hallucination if you can't see where you're going?
Right. Well, that also makes me wonder too if like there are other people who passed away prior to Ron and other people who were able to escape and then helped other survivors.
That makes so much sense. To me. Because I feel like when you pass, I mean, I don't know because I don't remember the last time I passed, but I just feel like you do have at least a few moments,
right,
to like view your own body and like try to accept that you've died,
right, or you don't even know and you're just like acting.
That's true. Oh, that makes me sad that people think that they escaped and they're out there and then,
but they saved someone else.
They did. There's a group of firefighters during 9/11 who recall a mysterious figure who arose from the North Tower and led them all to the stairs to safety when they were all trapped and also disoriented. And there's so many examples of this. And I did find this BuzzFeed article that I read about third man syndrome. And you know what's so funny is I like found this BuzzFeed article and they were citing, I think on And That's Why We Drink had covered third man syndrome.
Oh, really?
And they were like, I love third man syndrome. So I collected a bunch of third man syndrome stories from other BuzzFeed readers. So
that is so funny.
So I've collected their collection of third man syndrome stories.
Okay.
And there's a million more on Reddit. But I wanted to read a few of these because, oh
my
I mean, they're just so interesting. I know. I told you this was going to be a long episode. This is sent from Anonymous. They said, I once fell about 10 feet from a ledge overlooking a lake. The ledge was above large rocks, and as I fell, I was sure I was about to be gravely hurt. Suddenly, I felt a large hand on my back that caught me and pushed me against the wall. Surprised, I turned around to thank my savior, and no one was there. I was dangling over the rocks, feeling the hand as it pushed me straight up against the wall until both my feet were secured. I cannot explain what happened to this day, but I do know that there was someone or something out there that saved me.
Jeez.
Another person, Anonymous. I'm disabled and I survived the attacks on the Twin Towers. I was buried under the debris for about 15 hours, but I was never alone. I kept hearing from a voice that said his name was Michael. When I was weakest, he would just keep talking to me. When I was rescued, I found out that there was never a man named Michael anywhere in that area. I still wonder about the voice that saved me from becoming another death on that terrible day.
Yeah. Like, is Michael a guardian of his, or like, was Michael someone else in the towers? Jeez.
Another Anonymous. When my husband was in his 20s, he fell asleep while driving and crashed into a telephone pole. He was hurt and remembered a teenage kid knocking on his window and telling him that he had called the police and not to get out of the car because there were live wires everywhere. When my husband was finally rescued, there was no sign of this kid. The police said that no one had called them. They were just coming because the power was out. Not only that, but they said that there was no way anyone could have even gotten close to the car on account of all of the live wires. If my husband had tried to get out of the car, they probably would have killed him. My husband so vividly remembers this kid. He believes he was real, but his mom believes that this was his guardian angel. I'm chills. Okay.
Another idea is like, what if it's like your soul from a past life who's like, no, it's not your time yet. Like,
oh, interesting.
Like you didn't live long enough. Like you have to keep going. There's so many possibilities.
Okay, I have 4 more examples from this BuzzFeed article. This is from Emily in Ohio. A few years ago, we were on family vacation in Virginia Beach. The water was pretty choppy. The waves kept knocking me down before I could even properly get in. So as I was pregnant, I decided to relax on the sand instead. My husband and my 3 siblings went out swimming, and without realizing it, my husband and one of my sisters got pulled out pretty far. They were far from everyone else swimming, and a lifeguard was blowing the whistle that they needed to come back in. The water was so rough. They were having such a hard time getting any closer to shore and genuinely thought that they might drown. My sister is pretty petite, so my husband ended up carrying her piggyback style back to the shore, and they were both pretty scared and tired, and my husband told me that he felt something or someone had helped them make it back. He said it felt like someone was giving him a push. Ooh. The next day, there was a perfect handprint on his back on the right side of his shoulder blade. Oh. It looked like a reverse sunburn in the perfect shape of a hand. So yeah, someone was definitely looking out for them that day.
Again, it's like, why do some people have this and others don't?
Yeah.
And is it because of destiny? Is it fate?
I don't know. It makes me so sad.
Or is it just like right place, right time?
Survive
and there's just like an energy there that it's like happens to be there. I don't know.
I don't know either. Another from Anonymous. I was a teenager in the 80s and I was driving alone at night in a rainstorm. I hate driving at night, especially in the rain. Anyway, I ended up hitting a pothole and my tire popped. I was kind of in the middle of nowhere, but I somehow made it to a parking lot. It was empty from what I could tell, and this was obviously before cell phones or anything, so I was going to try to change my tire myself when I realized I didn't have a spare. I sat in my backseat trying to think of what to do when I heard a tap on my passenger window. There was a man's voice saying, "You need a hand, miss?" I felt my car being jacked up, and I heard the sound of someone messing with my tire. I remember clutching my tire iron in my hand as I got out of the car to try to get a better look at the guy and see what the hell was going on. And as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. I sat back in my car again, still thinking, and then a few minutes later, the rain cleared up a bit, and I made my way to the store whose parking lot I ended up in to try to use their phone to call my dad. My dad showed up with a spare tire, only to tell me that all of my tires were totally fine. So now, I always wonder if any of this was real at all.
That one's also like, is this a glitch in the Matrix?
Yeah, because it's like their actual tire to their car
is now no longer deflated.
Right. It's like some magic little fixing your tire.
Jeez.
Okay, last one. Also sent in from someone anonymous. I was driving on a somewhat rural road on a very windy winter's day. The snow was being whipped across the road and a sudden gust of wind hit the back end of my car. This caused me to fishtail and I lost control. I shot across oncoming traffic, off an embankment, and rolled the car into a field. As I was airborne, I felt someone sitting next to me in the passenger seat. After the car flipped 360 degrees and slammed back down onto my tires, I heard a voice in my head tell me that I was unharmed, and I felt a gentle caress across my forehead. Once I had determined my neck wasn't broken and that I could move, I saw that I was covered in windshield glass. It was everywhere, except for the passenger seat. There was only glass bits around the edges of the seat, like someone had been sitting there. I didn't have any scratches or any bruises on me. The police officers and the tow truck driver could not believe that I was uninjured, given the state of my car. And since then, I've tried so hard to be a better human and to repay whoever or whatever saved me that day. So yeah, this is third man syndrome. It remains one of the most mysterious phenomena that defy easy explanation.
Yeah.
It leaves us with the question of, is it a product of our brains in survival mode? Are we tapping into some hidden reserves of strength?
Sure.
Is this the power of the human mind and our will to survive? Or is this something beyond explanation, beyond science, beyond our brain chemical makeup?
Is it paranormal?
Is it? Are we connected to the spirit world? Is this granting us temporary access to the spirit world and helping them save us?
Or just an energy that we don't typically access? I mean, this also makes me think like the survival of going back to Sir, what's his name?
Ernest Shackleton.
Ernest Shackleton, like that group, like if you have so many people who are all trying to survive, the energy of all of them trying to survive, does that create almost like another person?
Yeah.
They created an energy, like the same way you can create a haunting. Did they create an energy that wanted to survive so badly that it did?
Like your will to survive in a group like that. Like that's undeniably powerful, like the energy that is put forward. I don't know. I hope no one experiences the trauma and these situations that third man syndrome often finds itself appearing in. But I do think that there's something pretty beautiful about the idea that in these moments of distress, there's likely someone waiting there to save you.
Yeah. And if you die, there's also someone waiting there to guide you. The Grim Reaper or your loved ones, your pets who have passed away. Wow.
In our darkest moments, there is light.
And you're not always alone. You're actually never alone, even when you shower.
Yeah. The ghosts are watching you.
The ghosts are washing you.
They also get Willy Wonka golden tickets. Who gets to watch Sabrina today?
They're like, she never gets her feet. Let's get them for her. Okay, well, so I didn't totally know what the third man syndrome was, and I didn't want to look it up to ruin it for myself.
Yeah.
But I did like a quick, and I just saw like saved or whatever. So I thought it was like premonitions and stuff. But I ended up pulling a story that is about a guardian angel.
Perfect.
This is from our listener, Carrie, and it is called Granddad Saved My Life. Hi, ladies. I recently discovered your podcast and have been binge listening ever since. I don't think my story is super scary, but it is the moment I stopped questioning if ghosts were real or not.
I love this.
My granddad was my best friend in the whole world until he passed away when I was just 17 years old. I always felt he was with me, especially during stressful times, but I chalked it up to just missing him and wishing I could call him for advice. And then when I was 22, my mom called me to tell me that my grandma, my granddad's wife, had suffered an abdominal aortic aneurysm, and it wasn't looking good. So I got in my car to take the 4.5-hour drive to see her. I was about 4 hours into my trip when the weather got extremely bad, and the only other time I'd experienced rain that heavy was during a hurricane. So many people were pulling over onto the shoulder to wait out the storm, but I was determined to see my grandmother before she passed away. So I kept going. Out of nowhere, I felt the back collar of my t-shirt move and instantly felt the need to change lanes. But I was so focused on staying safe in the rain that I stayed in the inside lane and kept going. A few minutes later, that same sensation happened again, something pulling on the back collar of my t-shirt.
Ooh.
And once again, I ignored it. Almost immediately, it happened again, but this time the pull on my collar was so strong that it pulled my entire upper body back into the seat. And while my car stayed straight, I felt my steering wheel jerk to the right. I was so creeped out and had no idea what was going on, but I took all of it as a sign that I needed to change lanes. So I waited for an opening and switched to the outside lane. Less than a minute later, I looked in my driver's side mirror and through the heavy rain and watched a massive multi-car accident happen in the inside lane that I had just been in.
Holy shit. This feels like Final Destination.
It does.
Doesn't it?
I spent the rest of my trip with my stomach in my throat. When I finally got to the hospital, my aunt said that they had been worried about me, because this was before everyone had a cell phone, because I saw the news that there had been an accident with multiple fatalities. Turns out it was the accident that I had just witnessed and just missed. That was the moment I knew that ghosts were real and my granddad had saved my life by pulling on my collar and telling me to switch lanes, and I have not ignored him since. Keep up the good work.
Man.
Thanks for letting me share my story, Carrie.
These things are so difficult because it's like, on one hand, you're so, like, it's such a powerful thing to either listen to your intuition or listen to the signs that you're getting, and like you get to be saved.
Right.
But it's so upsetting that other people also, either they don't have those opportunities or they didn't recognize it.
Right.
And like there's still death.
And also the fact that for Carrie, Carrie experienced the tug 3 times. The first 2 times she ignored it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the 3rd time where it was like really aggressive and then the wheel itself was turning that she was like, oh shit, okay, like I need to listen to whatever this is.
Yeah.
But like some people might only get 1 warning or 0 warnings. Yeah. It's like, it's tough.
It is tough.
But I'm glad, Carrie, that you are safe and we're okay. And I hope you were able to see your grandmother.
Dang.
Oh man, this is we started this episode talking about how like we were feeling the weight of the world and how heavy it is.
I know.
And I
was like,
feel
I picked
more.
I picked an upbeat, like kind, loving episode for us. Somehow it got pretty heavy.
Yeah. I'm still feeling that donut.
Yeah.
And not a good donut. Not I get to eat this donut. More of like I ate too many donuts and now I'm bogged down and want to take a nap and
12
sleep.
potato donuts in.
Yeah. We're heavy.
Now I want the holy donut. Oh man, I'm craving.
But we hope all of you are doing well out there, and we want to say we love you all. We're so grateful for all of you for listening. And if you have experienced anything like this, a guardian angel experience, third man syndrome, or if you have any paranormal encounters or alien, Bigfoot, cryptid, whatever it may be, please email them to us at twogirlsoneghostpodcast@gmail.com. And this is a reminder, with the holidays coming up, ask anyone you see on the street for their ghost stories. And
because in fact, you think of ghost stories as being a Halloween tradition. It's actually a Christmas tradition.
It is.
So this is the season for ghost stories.
Gather them and send them to us. That's our gift. That's all we ask of you. Our Christmas wish this year
Send us your ghost story.
Send us your ghost stories. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Shout out to Jamie Ryan, who edits our podcast. And we love you. And we will see you on the other side.